Hello, welcome to another episode of History in the Dark. I am your host, Darkness the Curse, and before we begin, as always, thank you so much to my generous patrons, my British rail critics, and of course, my underwater train finders, Thomas Ward, Lord Captain Von Thrust III, Some Dude 267, Longsight, Joshua Long, Ohio Trucker 1, Royal Hudson 2860, and Lord Hoth 444. You are the reason why this content remains in the center ring! And yes, today we are moving on to our second round of Roundhouse Rumble, people! Let's get it on! And I bet everybody's wondering, who won? Who won the first round? Where are we sitting? Well, let's go over each match individually, and I'll explain who claims victory. Moves on to our second round. Our first matchup was 6'11 versus 844. And this one was a really tough one for me because the voting was actually very close. Right now 844 is in the lead, but 6'11 was in the lead for a while, and they've been neck and neck for most of the week. So it's pretty obvious to me that when it comes to crowd favor, it's very split. And that makes sense because these are both absolutely beautiful, outstanding locomotives. So I have to look at other factors between the two. Both have interesting stories, but I lean more towards 6'11's as she managed to recover from two major accidents, one of which threw her off the rails. 844 has been under the watchful eye of Union Pacific, and while it is impressive that she's never been retired, the fact that she didn't really have to fight very hard for her position doesn't really win me a lot of sympathy points with her. Not to say she isn't impressive, the FEF3s are, but the other factor you have to consider is that in some ways, the J-classes could be called superior to the FEFs. Some pointed this out in the comments. Not only has 844 had a lot of flat, straight track to work with, but her design is actually slightly less efficient than the J-class 6'11. The Queen of Steam's original railway was very hilly and curvy, and instead she still managed to handle long, heavy freight trains and fast passenger trains without an issue. 6'11 also has maintenance advantages too. She has roller-bearing side rods and an automatic lubrication system that allowed her to travel 500 miles without any service stops. She also has a larger boiler and produces over 5,000 horsepower. And on top of that, she has one of the highest tractive efforts out of any 484 ever built. The J-Class also covered more miles per month than the FEFs did, despite their railway technically being smaller and having more rough terrain to work with. So in many ways, the design ethos behind the J-Class could be called a bit better than the FEF3s. Not that the FEF3s are bad, they're great, but 6'11 as a J-Class is arguably one of the best steam locomotives ever built. As far as visuals go, I think it really depends what you're looking for. 844 definitely has more of a classic industrial steam engine look. There's no streamlining on her or anything like that, but some people prefer it. On the flip side, if you like streamlining, let's be fair, 6'11 is an absolutely beautiful locomotive, perfectly worthy of being called a queen. So who wins this at the end of the day with a very close popularity race? Well, $6.11! I know some people are going to get mad about this. They're going to get mad no matter who I pick, let's be fair. But 844, I know she's a living legend, never really had to struggle to earn that. It was just a rudimentary decision that Union Pacific made. 6'11's had so many ups and downs throughout her history, and that combined with her arguably more efficient design really seals the deal for her quality here. I think she has the best shot at beating whoever wins the UK competition, so I think her victory here makes the most sense, logically. And I just want to remind everybody this is for fun, and I don't want to sneer at 844 at all. I love 844. She's a great locomotive. But I gotta go with my gut on this one, and I feel like 6'11 really earned it. Moving on to the second round, we have 4449 versus 4014. Now this voting was a bit more distant, with 4014 having a very clear lead. 4449 actually fought back pretty hard, as originally 4014 looked like he was gonna win in a landslide. But popularity is definitely giving 4014 an advantage here, but let's not count out 4449 just yet, as you have to remember, she's got a much better story than 4014. 4014 was just put on display at the Rail Giants Train Museum in Pomona, California, until 2013 when Union Pacific decided to reacquire the locomotive and put him back into service. That's literally the whole story. There's nothing inherently exciting about that. But 4449 has a much more interesting story. After she was officially retired in 1957, she was put on display in Oaks Park, Portland, Oregon. Her choice for static display was actually dumb luck. When they were choosing a locomotive to donate to the city of Portland, they only took 4449 because she was first in the line of engines to be scrapped. If she had been in any other spot, another locomotive would have taken her place. But since she could be pulled out with the fewest switching moves, they took her. 4449's static display years were rough. She was exposed to the elements and repeatedly vandalized, also having many of her external parts stolen, including her builder's plates and her whistle. Her appearance quickly degraded, but a man by the name of Jack Holst, who was a Southern Pacific employee, actually took it upon himself to look after 4449, along with two other steam locomotives. Holst made it a point to keep their bearings and rods oiled in case they were ever able to move again. And sadly, he'd never get to see the day that 4449 was returned to the rails, as he died in 1972. But in 1974, 4449 was evaluated for restoration, and she became a candidate to pull the American Freedom Train, specifically because her bearings and rods were in good condition. As a direct result of Jack Holst's efforts, 4449 was removed from the display on December 13th in 1974 and restored at the Burlington Northern Railroad's Hoyt Street Roundhouse. She returned to operation by April 21st, 1975, and wore a special paint scheme of red, white, and blue. From then on, 4449 would appear at many different events, and even made a side-by-side entrance into the Los Angeles Union Passenger Terminal with Union Pacific 844 for the station's 50th anniversary celebration. Her list of appearances and events are too long to name, and there's a reason she's one of the most famous locomotives in North America. But that's actually where I got stuck, because based off of some of the comments I received, I realized that her fame is actually restricted to North America. A lot of people outside of the US don't seem to be familiar with 4449, and even though 4014's story isn't quite as long or heartfelt, the fact is, as a big boy, 4014 has international acclaim. People outside of America know what a big boy is, and not all of them know what 4449 is. And this is super relevant to me. Honestly, before I did this matchup, I didn't even realize that 4449's fame was so restricted. And another problem we have is performance. 449 as a GS4 isn't a bad locomotive at all. They're great. But in terms of power output and tractive effort, I don't really think this is a fair contest, if you know what I mean. 4014 is a big boy. And even if you want to claim speed, well, to be honest, the big boys aren't exactly slow either. 4014 can go really fast if you let him. Possibly not as fast as 4449, but pretty close. Based on all this, I gotta be honest, '4014! Yeah, I'm gonna have to go with the popular choice on this. 4014's international acclaim is just something I can't overlook. I love 4449. It's a wonderful steam locomotive with an amazing story. But when you put it up against the power and the record status of 4014, it's just not really a contest anymore, unfortunately. So on the America side, we have 611 and 4014 moving forward. But remember, we have to go across the Atlantic and talk about our friends over in the UK. The first battle over there was the Flying Scotsman versus the Duke of Gloucester. And it wasn't even close. Oh my goodness, the Flying Scotsman destroyed the Duke. And I was a little shocked by that. I really thought the Duke would at least put up a little bit of a fight. But I guess the Flying Scotsman's fame, especially being international, having gone overseas, is something that you really can't compete with. I do think the Duke puts up a bit better of a fight though. In terms of performance, he's a more modern design that has been modified by his preservers to be even better than when British Rail had a hold of him. The Flying Scotsman is classic and a great technical achievement for his time, but the Duke has newer technology put into him. That means in terms of performance, the Duke easily trumps the Scotsman. But does that mean he beats him when the crowd is showing such obvious favor here? No, Flying Scotsman takes it. just no way I can reason out of this. I love the Duke, without question. An absolutely beautiful locomotive that I hope will remain an icon of steam technology in the UK for years to come. But it's the Scotsman, guys. I guess I don't even need to tell you, given how y'all voted. But the one I was less sure about was the last matchup, the Lancashire Fusilier versus the Black Prince. Fusilier is a Black 5, one of the most dominant and amazing locomotives the UK ever produced. The Black Prince is a 9F, arguably the flat-out best, and definitely one of the largest locomotives the UK ever produced. So which one wins here? Well, if we go by popular opinion, the Black Prince definitely has a clear lead, and it actually remained that way for a while. Maybe it's just the name, the Black Prince. It's simple, but man, I love it. So edgy. But I don't want to disrespect the Fusilier on this, as he's named after a line infantry regiment of the British Army. That's what the Lancashire Fusiliers were. They saw distinguished service over many years and many wars, including the First and Second World Wars. But to be honest, other than that, the Fusilier isn't that notable as a locomotive. Sure, it's a running Black 5, and that's great, but there are 18 to reserve Black 5, so she's not that unique. It's not like over in America with 611, who's the only one of her class left. Fusilier's got plenty of siblings around. To be fair, so does the Black Prince, though less than the Fusilier. The Black Prince, in terms of performance, should be said to be superior to a Black 5. Quite easily, I wager. They didn't serve nearly as long, so have less of a legacy, but their potential speed, tractive effort, on most things the 9S were probably superior to the Black 5s. They were simply newer. The only thing I'd say is that Black 5s would have been better at shunting because they're smaller, but, I mean, what does that even say? Is that really a flex here? I don't think it's what we're looking for. So based on all this, I'm gonna have to give it to... the Black Prince! Yeah, you know, I go around on a channel called History in the Dark, calling myself Darkness the Curse, and you really thought I wouldn't lean towards Black Prince here? I mean, come on. Plus, he was the popular pick, and though I love Black 5s, the Fusilier just didn't compete here. The Black Prince is more unique, has better potential in terms of operation, and let's be fair, we all love that name. So it moves on. So now we have our second rounds, and 2 new voting tallies to take. In America, we have the J-Class 611 versus 4014 Big Boy. And over in the UK, we have the legendary Flying Scotsman versus a standard class 9F Black Prince. Who will be the ultimate preserved locomotive for the respective countries and move on to the final battle of United States versus United Kingdom preserved steam locomotives in the Roundhouse Rumble? Find out next week. And until then, this is Darkness, and I bid you all a fond farewell.